Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be doing my round 7 tips for the AFL season. I'm going to be going through every team, how they played in the previous round, and what might make the difference in this game, as well as giving my margin for the game. Last week, I believe I got 4 or 5 out of 8, and let's hope I can improve on that for this week. To start with, we have the two teams coming off the bye in Richmond versus Melbourne, playing at the G. Richmond are coming off a disappointing loss before the bye against West Coast in WA, and before that they had almost beat St Kilda and then just beat Sydney. And then Melbourne are coming off a disappointing loss against Brisbane before their bye as well. So two teams who are kind of out of form, one who is towards the bottom of the ladder in 16th and another who is 6th on the ladder. I think we have also finally got a good ladder with everyone playing the same amount of games, and that sort of shows the difference. Melbourne are the clearly more talented team, and I could think you can make that argument on every single line. And I just think that they should easily get the job done after bouncing back, and they should get it by at least 4 goals. On the Friday, we have the ANZAC clash between Essendon and Collingwood. Essendon coming over very close, kind of controversial finish over Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, where they won by 4 points, and Sam Draper obviously had the non-free kick paid for potentially holding the ball. What were my thoughts on it? I think that it very well could have been paid holding the ball. He definitely dived on it. Saw Lee Matthews argue that it should have been in the back. That if you're lying flat on the ball, how else is someone meant to tackle you? He didn't push him necessarily completely in the back. He just landed on his back in a sense. So I don't think it would have been a push in the back, but I think that's what might have forced the umpire to not pay the free kick in the end. And so Essendon were able to get a really good win. They're able to get a good performance on all three lines. Their midfield was a bit better. Their forward line was able to produce, and their back line held up just enough. And then Collingwood are coming over a comeback win against Port Adelaide at the MCG. They were down by 30 something points and then came back and won by 40 points as well. So it's a really, really good win. It was a 73-point turnaround for them, and that's really, really good. Gets them going. They are now 3-3 on the season and can build off this. I think they are the better team. I'm not sure who Essendon are getting back yet. I don't believe they're getting. Actually, they might be getting Peter Wright back for this week. He should slot straight back into the team over potentially Goldstein and be that second ruck as the key forward, because I think they need it. But it'll be interesting to see how these two teams play, because they do normally lift for the game. But I think Collingwood should get the win. I think it will be potentially a very close game as well, but I've got them winning by 14 points. We now have GWS versus Brisbane. GWS coming off a disappointing loss against Carlton, but obviously no Sam Taylor, no Cornelio. They were just a bit lesser than their best. They were starting off okay, got their game going in the second quarter, and then sort of died down in the second half. In that third quarter, both Kerno and Mackay dominated the game, and they were just never able to turn it on after that. Their transition game wasn't going. They were really forced deep into their backline, which they're not used to. And after that, they just couldn't get their transition game moving. Both Toby Green and Jesse Hogan could potentially be out for this week, which may hurt them even more. And then Brisbane are coming off a very disappointing loss up at the Gabba against Geelong. They are now 0-3 there to start the season, and they're looking a bit fragile, you could call it. They don't have the same bite as they did last year, and their forward line is really, really struggling, and their back line isn't necessarily holding up to the same standards it did in the back end of last year. For them, they need to get it going. They can't start 2-5 against a really, really still solid GWS team. And so I think for them, this is a must win to get their season back on, because it did look like it was starting to go before the Geelong loss, but now they need to get this win. Do I think so? I think it relies on the availability of Toby Green and Jesse Hogan. And so it's a bit of a wait and see. But at the moment, I will be tipping Brisbane by less than 10 points. We then have Port Adelaide versus St Kilda at the Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide coming off a disappointing in the end loss to Collingwood at the MCG, where they started like a house on fire and weren't able to hold on, and Collingwood just overran them. They still couldn't hold on to the lead at half time, and then they just were never back in the game. It was a disappointing loss to be able to start so good and fade away, but in the end, it was probably against a red hot Collingwood team, and it was away from home as well. They were missing Dixon, they were missing Boak as well, so they were a bit below 100%. And then St Kilda were coming off a 60-point drubbing against the Western Bulldogs. Their midfield was whacked, their forward line structure was horrible, and their back line couldn't win a one-on-one to save their life. So no area for them was firing, and they were beaten by a pretty solid on the night team in the Western Bulldogs. This is going to be an interesting game. I think if Boak and Dixon are back, then it's going to make things really, really tough for St Kilda. But they also may get Max King back. There are also a lot of players who played in a Pracky match who have been on the injury list. So maybe a Paddy Dow, maybe a Mason Wood are back, maybe a Hunter Clark. It's a bit of a wait and see. And so on Tuesday, maybe we'll get a clearer answer. But at the moment, I don't think you can go past Port. I think their midfield will really get on top and they will break the game open, and they should win by just about 3 to 4 goals. Then we have North Melbourne versus Adelaide. North Melbourne are 0-6. They just lost to Hawthorn on the Sunday night, and it was a very poor performance. They were not good. Their backline hasn't been able to hold up to allow a Mitch Lewis and Luke Bruceless Hawthorn forward line to score 113 points is very disappointing. We obviously know there's huge flaws, and at the moment they're still waiting to get Griffin Logue back. Their forward line wasn't very good. Nick Larkey wasn't able to get into the game consistently. He was well beaten by Sam Frost. I thought he probably got on the scoreboard to get a bit of an even matchup, but I think Frost got the better of him over the night. Paul Curtis was okay. I thought he kicked, 2 goals in the end. It might have even been one, but he tried to break too many tackles and it just wasn't working for him. Cam Zurha wasn't in the match. And outside of that, they weren't very good. I thought Tristan Cherry had a good game and he was probably one of the bright spots. And then Adelaide coming off a very frustrating loss against Essendon at the Adelaide Oval on Friday night. They weren't able to sustain their pressure and their game as the number one outfit for long enough. They just weren't able to have their system be the better system throughout the game. And their midfield has been better, but their backline still hasn't been able to hold up. And their forward line still hasn't fully clicked. Darcy Fogarty hasn't found his form, and Lockie Gollan and Taylor Walker have to carry a bigger load than what they should be. So for this game, it's going to be quite interesting, but it looks to be an Adelaide win if you were to see it on the surface. But Adelaide aren't a great travelling team. It's played at Bellerive Oval, which I have no idea where it is. And I think North Melbourne want to vie for their win. Hopefully they are able to do it, but I don't know. I think it'll be an interesting coaching battle. Matthew Nix has wanted to try change a few things. It's okay, so I just looked it up, and Bellerive Arena is actually Blundstone Arena. I don't know why they've got it here as Bellerive, but I think that sort of leans into North Melbourne's favour, and it'll be interesting to see who makes the first move. But I think you can't go past Adelaide at the moment, even though they did lose to Essendon. I still think they are the better team, and that means North Melbourne, in my prediction at least, start the season 0-7. We then have Geelong versus Carlton at the MCG in what is the 6-0 Cats versus 5-1 Blues. Geelong just seem to get wins after win after win. They don't need to even perform at their best, but they are going to be missing Tom Stewart, who is a huge piece for them, as we know, an Australian halfback flanker. He's going to be missing due to concussion, and that should be a real thing for Carlton to go for. They brought in O'Sullivan, I think it was 2 weeks ago against North Melbourne, so maybe he comes back in. Maybe that frees someone up like Zach Guthrie or Jade Collar-Jasny to be able to play that Stewart role. But we'll wait and see. Maybe if Mark Blitzarves goes behind the ball. So it'll be interesting to see what Chris Cott goes with. Who know he can be creative with his decisions. But on to Carlton, they came off a very impressive win against arguably the most informed team in GWS. They started off okay, then went really cold, missed a few shots. Charlie Kerno went 0 of 4 in set shots, kicking 4 behind. But then in that third quarter, they really were able to turn things around. Their midfield got on top. Cripps and Walsh, I think, combined for 74 touches or something like that, something stupid. And then their key forwards in both Kerno and Mackay kicked 5 combined in the third quarter, which really separated the game. They were able to ride that high into the fourth and were able to sustain the lead and win by about 5 goals in the end. So it's a really, really good win for them. They will be without Zach Williams, it looks like, for the near future. So they're going to be really short on halfback flankers. Maybe a Jackson Binns comes in, but it's not very good for them. Their ball movement might stagnate a little bit. And they're really going to be relying on what looks like to be a Nick Newman-led backline, halfback flankers. Their key backs were okay. I thought Wiedering stood up well, and Lewis Young did okay without McGovern, and then Brody Kemp was solid. And I think their forward line should look to really go at a Stewartless Geelong backline. It'll be probably game of the round, it looks like, with 2 teams only losing 1 game for the year. And I think that Carlton's midfield will be a bit too big. Geelong want to get more on the outside with their midfield. Players like Bruin, Parfitt, and Dangerfield want to be a bit more outside. And I think Cripps and Hewitt will be able to get really in and under, and their midfield should be able to get on top. But I think with Geelong being such a good, well-coached and highly strung together team, I think they won't get blown out, and I think it'll be about three goals, so I'm going 16 points. Then we have what could also be a good game with Fremantle versus the Western Bulldogs. Fremantle are coming off a very disappointing loss against West Coast, where they were just playing really boring football. They weren't able to transition the ball very well, and West Coast were able to really pressure them in the middle. They weren't able to hold up defensively as well, with Waterman kicking 5, Reid kicking 3, and it seems like they might be slipping already after a really solid start. It's giving me shades of St Kilda 21-22 after their 2020 season, which is a bit of a biased view, I think you could say, but it sort of makes sense, where 2020 St Kilda make finals 1-1, 2022 Fremantle make finals and beat the Bulldogs, both teams beating the Bulldogs. The season after, they are very inconsistent. They don't play well, and they finish outside of the 8. And then in 2022, St Kilda started off really well, but then Angelino faded and signed on their coach for an extra 2 years in Brett Radden, and then fired him at the end of the season because of how poor they played. And then Fremantle might already be on the same track, losing to the West Coast Eagles, which should not be a loss you take. And then the Bulldogs are coming off a 60-point win over the Saints, where they were really, really good. No Libba, no Ugle-Hagan, and they were still able to absolutely smash the Saints. So it shows that there's still a really good backline in this team. Bont was at his best. Adam Chalor's an absolute star. Tim English was much better than what he had been. And Aaron Norton showed that he can be a really, really solid number 1 key forward. It's just whether they can gel now with Ugle-Hagan potentially back. Whether Waitman's able to stay alive in this forward line, because he kicked 3 within a span of 4 minutes. But then I thought he was quite shut down for the rest of the game. He didn't have a huge impact. He went up the ground a bit more. And then their backline held up really well against a relatively poor Saints forward line. And so I think Fremantle might be without Jai Mish. I'm not sure why he was subbed out, whether it was a concussion or a proper injury. But if they are without him, I think the Bulldogs probably start favourites. However, I think the Bulldogs backline will be able to stall the Bulldogs key forwards. Their inconsistency will show again. And I have a Fremantle upset by less than a goal. To finish the round, we have Gold Coast versus West Coast up at Carrara Stadium. The Gold Coast Suns are coming off a poor loss to the Sydney Swans, where they challenged in the first half. Apparently there was a bit of a wind, which is how Sydney got out to the lead in the first quarter. But then Gold Coast were really dominant in the second. They were able to control the ball in their front half of the ground. They just couldn't put it on the scoreboard. Ben King was really well held by McCartan, even though he came off with a knee injury. He came back on and held him really, really well. Melican was able to play well on Jed Walter, although he did still show signs. And Ethan Reid was very, very quiet, which it's okay. He's a rookie. But outside of that, their midfield was not the best. Rowell had a good game, but Miller was not able to be as damaging, and Anderson very rarely had the ball, and you couldn't really notice him. He did kick a goal, but outside of that, he was quite poor. And then their backline was not the best against a very solid Sydney forward line, where you can't really find a specific piece to go to. And then West Coast are coming off an excellent win against the Fremantle Dockers in Derby 58. They were just really, really exciting. Their backline held up against a missless Fremantle forward line, as I just mentioned. And then their forward line has been really, really working without Oscar Allen, which is a bit of a surprise. Jake Waterman has been absolutely fantastic and has a real chance to poll 6 Brownlow votes out of his last 2 games, kicked 6 against Richmond, 5 against Fremantle, in one of the better defensive teams so far this year. And so he's showing real signs. I think they might give Mac Andrew that matchup and then let Collins go to probably Jack Darling. But outside of that, West Coast, their midfield got going. Tim Kelly was really, really good. Jimby's had a good year to start. And then their backline has been good, although Tom Barras might be missing with a 1-match suspension. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays or not. But I still think either way, Gold Coast should get the job done. It's up at Carrara. It's going to be a really difficult trip for West Coast to make for such a young team. And they should get the win by about 20 points. I'm sorry, there was one more game, Hawthorn versus Sydney. I did think when I said that I didn't remember Sydney playing. And then, so here they are. Hawthorn are coming off a good win against North Melbourne, where they were just the much better side. They weren't as dour as they had been in the last couple games, and their midfield had been much better. Newcomb was really, really good. Sicily was back to his best. And then their forward line worked quite well without Bruce and Lewis to start the year. They brought in a couple of players and had dropped Josh Ward along with a couple of others, and they performed. So maybe the throwing of the magnets around by Sam Mitchell could have worked, could have reinvigorated a couple of players, and it seems to have worked at least in the short term. They should be hoping for a couple of players back. I'm not sure who, but let's hope they get them because they kind of need it, because it was only against North Melbourne. And then Sydney are coming off a good win against a Gold Coast team who have a lot of talent but aren't quite there yet under Hardwick's new system. They were the more experienced team. They had the better players, and their midfield once again has really continued. Bodie Gundy was very good, kicked his first goal for Sydney in his 200th game. Isaac Heaney continues his excellent form, and Errol Goulden, Chad Warner, Taylor Adams were just really able to get going on the outside against the Suns midfield. Their backline held up really, really well, and their forward line kicked a really big score against a good Gold Coast defense. And so I think they should be the comfortable favourites and they should get the win. And I think it could get as much as over 5 goals. But that will wrap up round 7 of the AFL season. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It really help push the video in the YouTube algorithm. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about who you think might win and about the round just previous. Subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content, and thanks for watching.